I have a friend who has given us some support here, has supported us financially quite a bit, and he says that the real problem with Buddhism is that the entry point is suffering. That's not a very good entry point. So if you have a plan for how to bring people into something, it's bad if the entrance is suffering. And make a nice soft entrance, a nice joyful entrance, where people can come on in and have a good time at first, and then later, if necessary, you can give them suffering. Which is interesting because in his case, he came into the path through suffering. He was a very successful businessman, and then his father died, and he realized that everything he'd done was meaningless. That was a moment of true despair. That despair led him into the practice. It's interesting that given that it worked very well for him, he does describe it as a problem. And it makes sense. It is a kind of a problem. You can ask people, what's it like at a retreat? If you go to a retreat, what's it like? People may ask you, what's it like at a retreat? You went to that retreat, what was it like? Well, let's face it. It's hard to give a compelling, exciting explanation. Well, basically, we couldn't do anything, and we had to sit around in the cold for a long time. It was hard. Want to come? That can be what it's like. It's hard to understand what would be so good about this, especially given that not only are you stuck without anything really to do, you have to go according to a certain schedule. You don't have freedom. You're not given the 5 chords of sensual pleasure, very much anyway. Although I would like to mention, for those of you who may find as time goes on that the complaints about the physical discomfort and such are growing, that we should acknowledge that we now here are more comfortable than most people. Let's face that. We should at least acknowledge that. May not be as comfortable as we rich modern people would like to be, but we're actually doing fine. We're healthier, more physically comfortable than billions of people are right now at this moment. So, while it can come up, I understand that. Nonetheless, we should keep a bit of perspective. So anyway, here we are. We have a difficult situation already, sitting in metal chairs and thin cushions, and to sit with these people who we didn't choose to be with, who were doing all sorts of things that we'd prefer they didn't. What's so good about that, we ask? So we come, hopefully, to a Dharma talk where we're going to hear why we're doing this after all. We can get some motivation, feel exhorted just a bit. And what do we get? Well, we're told that, you're basically a sheaf of barley, and you're getting flailed. That's kind of what life is. We don't feel, perhaps, all that inspired. Why would it be? Why is it that we emphasize this point of suffering so much? Why would that be? This is a difficult question to answer. It's not a difficult question to know the answer to. The answer is very simple and clear. But it's nonetheless a difficult question to explain. It's hard to explain this answer, because the answer is real. The answer is real. The answer is that suffering matters. Suffering we may find, each of us may find, is real, is a real thing. And if you experience it, it changes you. And our hope here is that the experience of suffering will change us for the better. It's common for us that we have the experience of suffering and it makes us brittle, it makes us confused, and it causes us most significantly to lose confidence, to lose a sense of self-confidence. We come to the point of perhaps believing that we could never really escape. It wouldn't be possible to actually escape. I just inherently suffer. It's just part of what I really am. Suffering is part of my fabric. Who I really am suffers. And that's that. Nothing can be done, because at the bottom, in reality, is suffering. We have this word, asuttava, this asuttava puttujano. The words here. This uneducated ordinary person, as it says. So this means not, and the sutta is teaching. They're being taught. Puttu is ordinary, and then janna is person or people. It is, of course, derogatory, but it's important to look at that word and see that it's not saying that a person is inherently foolish. They just haven't received the appropriate instruction. So they do bad things. They make mistakes. Bad things are happening. And it's important to be, you could say, judgmental about it. But it's not that they're inherently mistaken. It's just circumstantially incorrect. We receive that instruction through friendship, and we live in structure, and because of that, it becomes possible for us to face the suffering and actually work through it. And that gives us enormous self-confidence, to actually face the suffering and work through it. So I understand that sometimes it's a little bit difficult. Difficulty can come up. And, in fact, we emphasize the fact that difficulty may come up. And then further, we start emphasizing the fact that everything you're experiencing, you experience this pleasant sight, unpleasant sight, pleasant sound, pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling, pleasant thought, unpleasant thought. And all of that is, in a way, suffering. We do that partially in order to give ourselves the opportunity to move through whatever suffering is present with confidence, that it can actually be resolved, that it's resolved through complete experience of it, not at all by grabbing onto it. Grabbing onto it doesn't resolve it. Total experience of it does resolve it. Grabbing onto it, pushing it away, these are our typical solutions. When suffering arises, we typically grab onto it or push it away. When something pleasant comes up, we typically grab onto it or push it away. When something unpleasant comes up, we typically grab onto it or push it away. But in this case, we don't. We experience it totally just as it is. That is done due to the confidence that we can stay with it just as it is. Because what's the other option? What's the other possibility? The other possibility is simply insanity, delusion. Some of you know me well enough to know that I've gone through hard times. Catherine, to a certain extent, knows recently. Gone through hard times. We've talked about it. Various forms of pain, grief. And I saw, as we realized that this sensory realm is a swirling vortex of empty pain. That's directly seen. You see, we can't trust people. We're betrayed, we're hurt, tricked, abandoned. We realize we can't trust our own judgment. Our own inner world is mistaken. Everything starts falling apart. At that time, we realize that there is an escape from it. There's a feasible escape from it. And that is lie. Delude yourself. Don't face it. As I say, it's a concern for me that people nowadays don't face things as they are, even if that means facing suffering. My mother ran the Vermont refugee program for a number of years, and she saw that most people, if a family member dies, they are in despair for at least days. They don't do anything except cry. For at least days. What happens in our culture when someone we've loved for our entire life, dies? Well, maybe we're late for work, depending on what is happening at work. This is a totally different approach to something like love. It's a kind of love that we feel for each other that doesn't require grieving of any sort when it ends. If someone dies, or if something else happens, we're expected to just move on with things. As I often say, if there's any one thing that broke my modern hypnosis, my modern blindness, there's only one thing that happened in the monastery in which I realized, oh my gosh, I have been completely wrong. I don't know what happened, but I became blind and numb and deaf. It was the moment I was in the interview room with the Roshi, and I suddenly realized that feelings are legitimate. That was a complete shock to me, partially because I didn't even know that I thought they weren't. I didn't even know that I believed that feelings are illegitimate or wrong. They're just subjective, after all. It's just your own subjective experience. They're not real. It's not objective truth. You're supposed to be stronger than that. You're not supposed to believe in your feelings. Especially as a man, you're not supposed to even have feelings. Ideally. I mean, if you do, then okay, we'll put up with it. But at least work on it. And I realized suddenly, how did that ever happen? How did this absolutely tangible experience get turned into something that isn't even legitimate? It's because we ascend, we construct a delusional, insane world that we live in and that we try to live in together. We try to agree on our delusions so that we stop getting questioned about what we're wrong about. If we all are wrong about the same stuff, then it feels more comfortable. And so rather than seeing this, looking at this, realizing that whatever we see, we're being struck by it. Whatever we hear, we're being struck by it. Whatever we feel, we're being struck by it. Whatever we think, we're being struck by it. Rather than facing that and moving through it, we move into a numb, meaningless world in which we are strangely blind and deaf, numb and without an inner world, while at the exact same moment being totally addicted to the sights, sounds, feelings, ideas of modernity. I saw, in that state of despair, that insanity, going into that numbness, making up a world, constructing it, and then living in it, is how we have, escaped from facing this suffering. You can face the suffering, but if it's too much, if you can't face it, then you always have the option of making up a world in which it doesn't exist. And that's insane. It's really insane. If you face this, though, then you have a deep confidence. I myself, a couple of times, have visited it happens, of course, with all of us, certainly in this community. Some people have it seemed right, for whatever reason, for them to be in the psych ward of a hospital. And as my students, it was my responsibility and honor and joy, actually, to visit them there. And so I've been there. I've been in that place. And I've noticed a few things. One is that, yes, people there are insane. That's true. Another is that there's great suffering, and the doctors and nurses are afraid of it. They can't help it. They're terrified of it. And I felt, walking through that psych ward, like I was the only person who wasn't afraid. The only person who wasn't basing everything I said and did on fear. Everyone else is just afraid. We just have to avoid the suffering at any cost, because there is no way out of it. There isn't a real way out. There isn't actually an escape. No. There are lots of ways of avoiding it. And that's your best bet. That's all we've really got. It's so interesting. Some of you know this story, but I have a friend named Lee Rosen who's in charge of the psychology department at University of Vermont. And I have another friend named Josh, and not my close friend Josh, but someone else. And Josh was a medical student, and in the beginning of his study there, the very first thing that happened was that the heads of the various departments came and gave an overview of what they'd be learning over the next few years. And so Lee came, and he had an hour to give a lecture. And he started the lecture by saying, what I'd like to do in this hour is explain to you everything, all the major discoveries that we've found in the past 50 years of research in psychology. There have been many studies that have been done, and I'd like to tell you all of the major things that we've discovered. And what we've discovered is this. In general, facing your problems is better than avoiding them. That was his whole lecture. Had nothing else to say. And that's all we've discovered. It seems that most of the time, facing your problems is better than avoiding them. That's what it looks like. Any questions? Well, sometimes discovering something isn't good enough, because I wouldn't say that most of us, including that profession, has actually realized the fact that in general, facing our problems is better than avoiding them. When we are taught that everything you see, hear, feel, know is you being beaten, what this truly is simply permission. It's saying, you know what? If you're suffering, it's okay. We've been through that. We know what you're going through. It's okay. You're actually seeing things truly. You may still be insane, but there's a lot of that going around. And by facing it, we can overcome it. We can get through it. We can move through it. how do we face it? How do we actually face it? What does that mean to face it, to no longer move into this insane world, into this delusion? What does that actually look like? How is that actually done? Because we try lots of things. That's why this story is told in the text. Because it seems to Vepachiti that if he would just see things the way he's supposed to see things, then he'll be okay. If he just thinks it's the gods who are righteous while the Titans are unrighteous. Now, I would like to stay right here with the gods. Then everything gets better. It feels better. We have a pleasant feeling, and we're guided by that. And if we think the other thing, then it doesn't work out for us so well. Things become much more difficult. We are here, we're caught in this spell. We're caught in it. We're guided by it. We feel that it's truly valid. It's interesting because while I can say that it's at the monastery that I realize that feelings are legitimate, it's also at the monastery that I realize that our idea that how I feel is the way it really is, that I realized is not legitimate. Both sides of this are just two parts of the same realization. For most of us, if we feel like we want to do something, we actually must do it. We don't have a choice. We have to do it. We say things like, I have to follow my heart. I have to do this. I have to betray you and hurt you because I feel like it. And I must do that. And I mean that. I've been told this in these words. I felt this way when I thought about that thing, so I have to do it. It's out of my power. I must do it. This is the spell that we're in. This is the spell that Vepachiti is in. We're under this spell. We see things a certain way, so we have to do it. We hear things a certain way in our mind, so we have to do it. We feel things a certain way in our body, so we have to do it. We must. We must. And so we, as a community, just keep on going in the same direction. This spell isn't easy to break free of. The spell that Mara has put us under isn't easy to break free of. Because exactly the things that we trust to make us free of it are caused by it. Those very things are the tools of it, of the spell. And as we start to see this, as we start to deal with the significance of pain, significance of loneliness, significance of depression, the significance of anxiety, as we start to actually deal with that, we start to wonder if there is possibly any way out. We also need to be reminded that the ways we've been using to get out haven't worked. On the contrary, loneliness, depression, anxiety continue to increase in the world, not decrease. Destruction of life continues to increase in the world, not decrease. So on the largest of scales, on the smallest of scales, we're seeing the same problem continuing to grow, and we continue to confuse the solution and the source of this problem. We can't tell which is which. And so, in this particular text, we're told specifically what to do in order to break free. We're told specifically what to do. In conceiving, you're bound. Not conceiving, you're free. Many of you have heard, I suppose, of a very interesting Christian monk named St. John of the Cross. St. John is the person who came up with the term, the dark night. May you say the dark night of the soul. How do you say that? How do you say it in Spanish? Nobody knows? Oh, really? Noche obscura? Oscura? Yes? Oscura? What? I think it's oscura. De what? Oh, does he say that, though? I don't know if he uses the phrase of the soul. I don't know if he did. Maybe he did. I don't know. Did he? So, talking about the dark night. This dark night, why is it called the dark night? Why would he call it that? Why would he refer to it as the dark? What's so dark about this night? Have any of you read the poem? Who's read the poem? Oh, nobody's read the poem. You should read the poem. It's an excellent poem. So, it's about someone, we suppose a young woman, who is sneaking out of her house in order to meet her lover. We suppose a young man, although none of that's stated clearly. But there she is, sneaking out of the house. She has to sneak out somehow, you see. It's not so easy to sneak out. Everybody's watching to see if she's going to sneak out and meet her lover. So how's she going to get out? Well, of course she has to get out when it's dark. That's when no one can see her. So it's dark. And again it's repeated. It's so dark and no one can see. It's so dark and no one can see. And so she slowly sneaks out. She finally sneaks out of the house and meets her lover. And what does he do? Anyone know? Of course, he kills her. Because he's God and she's us. And her senses are completely ended. Totally ended. And she's left peaceful among the lilies. It's a magnificent poem about, obviously, spiritual awakening. So this point, he makes it absolutely clear that he's talking about dispensing with all of the senses, completely breaking free of all the senses. It's stated clearly. It's one of the few things that's stated literally in the poem. But the question of the metaphor, this dark night. Nowadays, dark night means something totally different because St. John also went through that other thing of the dark night. Nowadays, dark night means, what does it mean? It means you're practicing spiritually and then seems like it's a bummer. Right? That's what it means now, right? Seems hard. Isn't that what it means? You wanted the spiritual practice to be all fun and games, and then it wasn't. That's what the dark night is nowadays, right? Sort of tough. Like, oh no, things are not so good. I thought it was going to be perfect, and it's not. So that's what the dark night is. But in this particular poem, that's not the dark night. The dark night means that you're not conceiving. It means that you don't know what's happening. No one can see you. No one can understand. You're sitting here and you don't know what's happening. You don't know where you are. You don't know where you're going. You can't see anything. No one can find you anywhere. And where is this house? The house is just your own body, your own mind that you're escaping from. You have to get out of it somehow in order to meet God. So you have to leave when no one can see you. And what does that mean? That means that you've dispensed with I am. That's someone seeing you. I am this. That's someone else seeing you. I will be. That's your Father. catching you, trying to leave. I will not be. That's your mother. You can't leave. I will have form. I will be formless. I will have a mind. I will not have a mind. I will neither have a mind nor not. All of those are someone finding us. These are conceiving. These are ideas. We're conceiving. I'm practicing. I'm not practicing. I'm going to practice. I'm not going to practice. All of that wiped away. That's the dark. That's entering the darkness. That's entering the escape. That we can leave. We can continue on. And experience that which can't be seen, heard, felt, known. Brother Gilles is another Christian monk who was one of the disciples of St. Francis of Assisi. And he said, brilliantly, that which can be seen and heard and known is nothing, is not a fraction of that which cannot be seen or heard or known. Have we actually realized this? Have we actually realized freedom from consciousness, from perception, from form, from mind? Have we actually realized that? It's difficult for us to understand why we would want to. Things are going so well here in the castle of the gods. As long as I just think what I'm supposed to think, I'm given all kinds of pleasure and I can do what I want. It's very difficult for us under those circumstances to understand why it's so important for us to escape. And so those of us who have the good fortune of deeply experiencing suffering we must take advantage of it. And see that the source of the suffering isn't that we got something wrong. It's not that, okay, things didn't go so well with that person, but if I had just met a slightly different person, then everything would have been great, and I'd be in a nice romantic relationship that would have made me eternally happy. No. That's not how it would be. Well, I know I got that thing, that object, that possession. It didn't really make me that happy, but if I had just gotten another one that was a little different, then it would have made me happy. No. I look at things this way, I see things that way. It's not really true, it doesn't really make sense, and it certainly isn't giving me fulfillment, but if I just saw things a little bit differently and figured things out a little bit better, then I'd be happy. No. It doesn't work that way. The whole thing is wrong. The whole thing is basically getting flailed. The sheaf of barley can't hope that the next flail is going to be different from the last one. It's just how it is. It's the reality of it, and we see it. And because we see it, we have the opportunity to break free of this spell. And breaking free of this spell is essential if we actually want to serve the world, because as long as we're serving an imaginary world, we're not serving the real one. It's as if we're spending our lives taking care of people in a TV show. Just because you're spending your life taking care of people in a TV show, you're not taking care of real people, the real people to whom we have real responsibilities. We're trapped in this spell. How do we break free of the spell? For most of us, we have the idea, I'm going to think my way out of this. Well, most people here have tried that for quite some time. If you haven't tried that for quite some time, try it for quite some time. But after quite some time, give up on that, because it won't work. That's not how this works. Why doesn't it work? Because if you're dealing with models, with conceptions, it's not real. And this path is real. What we're doing here has to be real. Otherwise, who's doing anything real? Someone has to do it. This has to be real. And real means we're not making it up. So what's the way out of the trap of Mara? Don't make anything up. See this just as it is. That's what these techniques are for, to allow us to see this just as it is. And eventually, yes, we realize everything we think is made up. And furthermore, everything we see is made up. And furthermore, everything we hear is made up. Furthermore, everything we feel is made up. Did I tell you all about Mr. Brakely yesterday? That was the other talk. So when I was in 5th grade, I had Mr. Whaley. Mr. Whaley was great. But for math, I went across the hall to Mr. Brakely's room. Mr. Brakely was one of these fun teachers, young guys with a ponytail kind of teacher. And he taught us a lot of things beyond math. And I don't remember currently any of the math that we learned in 5th grade, and I have always been very bad at arithmetic. So maybe it's because he was teaching us other things, I don't know. But he taught us things much more important than arithmetic. One of the things he taught us was everything you know came to you through your senses. Now that completely blew my mind. And not in a happy way. I thought, what? Everything I know came through my 5 senses? That's terrible. I mean, that's nothing. The world is huge. What's coming through my senses is nothing in comparison to that. So I'm looking at this huge world through the tiniest peephole, and I'm basing my life on that? As a 5th grader, you can imagine. It was terrible. This is horrifying. I thought about it for years, and eventually realized he wasn't quite correct, that there is a 6th way of knowing, which is the mind, which is why here we have the 6 senses. But that didn't help much. The peephole just went from being this big to being this big. And then we make stuff up about the little peephole. So we're not even looking through the peephole anymore. If we're paying attention to our body sensations or to the floor or to the direct experience of what a thought is, then fine. Under those circumstances, we're at least looking out of the peephole. But most of us turn around and draw pictures of it and then look at those pictures. Then we're not even gathering more information. And we live our lives based on imaginary worlds that we have in this little tiny room with a little tiny peephole with virtually no information about reality. To actually break free of that, what happens? What happens? What are we aware of when the senses have ended? When consciousness has ended? This is worth exploring. Because until we know that, we're living with shocking arrogance. That the little bit of information that I have is going to be sufficient for dealing with the real problems of the world. But to break free of that, to actually break free of that, is the opportunity presented to us. And how is it done? It's done by taking a technique and not conceiving, not wavering, not procrastinating, not adding on extraneous, self-centered thinking. Instead of that, we stay with this exactly as it is, without conceiving, and allow whatever happens to happen, even if that means suffering. If that means that suffering happens, we realize it. We directly experience it. Even if it means realizing that we've been insane, that what we've been thinking, what we've been living by hasn't made any sense. We directly cut through it just as it is, by experiencing it just as it is, until we see that we didn't ever have to cut through it, because it was already of itself inherently impermanent. Inherently impermanent. That we didn't have to push it away, because it already is inherently suffering. Grasping on to anything impermanent is already suffering. And in realizing that, we can start to let go, which makes us see that neither there nor here was any of it myself. None of those things we found, none of those identities we made up, none of those stories that we told had anything to do with me. With that liberation comes joy. And to directly experience that joy heals us. We're healed in the beginning by directly experiencing suffering just as it is. And as we move with that and realize that this and this and this and this and this is impermanent suffering and not myself. In realizing that, we experience a completely new kind of joy that we didn't search for, we didn't plan on, we didn't want. And it's already arisen. It fills us and allows us finally to let go because we're not constantly searching, trying to get some kind of fulfillment. We're not dealing with a constant state of discomfort and suffering, needing to constantly search for some sort of fulfillment because it's already here before we search for it. The search is actually what made us miss it. It's already here and it fills us. And in filling us, we can let go. And letting go, the tightness subsides and we can heal. Because of that healing, we finally can live in a way that's of true benefit, rather than merely trying to avoid our wounds. Breaking free of these shackles of Mara. Of course, it may not be so easy. But just because it's not necessarily easy doesn't mean you have to plan on it being hard. Please know that a deep sense of faith can give us a sense of gladness. That gladness can mature into true concentration. That concentration can allow us to have an insight, and that insight can lead to liberation. This is all a natural process. It's a natural, simple process. So, St. John also gave us clear instructions. He said that there's a path. There's a path up the mountain. There's a way to get up the mountain to meet God, who is at the top of the mountain. You will meet God at the top of the mountain. There's a path that goes up that mountain. And he said that as long as you walk on that path and neither stop to pick the flowers nor run from the beasts, you will certainly reach the top of the mountain. And what is it that you will meet at the top of the mountain? Nothing. Nada. Nothing. Don't think that we can imagine nothing. To imagine nothing is just an imaginary idea of nothing, which is an idea which is not nothing. Any conception we have of nothing is not nothing. The direct experience of nothing is freedom. In that moment, we realize that everything that we've believed, including this practice, including the Buddha Dharma, was all wrong. We break free of all of it because we don't need any of it. Until then, we're just stuck on notions, holding on to this way and that way of looking at things. And what do we do about that? How do we go to true knowledge? Again, to quote St. John, he said, if you want to know what you do not know, then you must walk the way of not knowing. A little while ago, Catherine and I were at the very top of a tree, weren't we? We were on a walk and we saw a tree and it seemed like a good moment to climb it, so we climbed it. It was a high tree. It was a cedar tree, I think. Is that right? It was high. We were higher than the ceiling. It was high. We were up there pretty high. And we were talking. And I told her a story. I said that someone asked me recently, what is the ultimate purpose of this path? And I said, I don't know. So in the same way that God is a special kind of nothing, be very careful with this, I don't know. Because the person who asked me the question, after I said I don't know, she said, well, it's good of you to admit that. You have to be very careful with this, I don't know. You have to be very, very careful with it. Because it will give you a kind of happiness that you will trade your life for.